Welcome to the last 2023 episode of Tech Captains, where we explore the frontiers of technology and business. So I'm your host, Ron Danenberg, and along with Gareth Thomas, today we're joined by Neil Turner, the Chief Technology Officer of GoCardless, a leader in the world of recurring payments, very well known in the UK and across Europe. Neil has a rich background at companies like Capital One, Amazon, Blinkbox, and he brings a wealth of experience in leading technological innovations. And at GoCardless is at the forefront of redefining how businesses handle payments globally. So we'll dive into a conversation about the future of fintech, leadership, and innovation. Neil, it's great to have you with us. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. So, I think, Neil, just to start, what really inspired you to join GoCardless after your experiences in banking, in Capital One, at Amazon? How have how has your previous experience shaped your approach as CTO now at GoCardless?
Sure. Well, I never intended to join GoCardless. So
Okay.
I just finished working at Capital One. I'd made myself redundant, which is quite a good skill if you can do it occasionally. So I was going to take the summer off. I had got a young daughter. I'd finished working in finance. I'd done a startup to exit. Blinkbox was sold to Tesco's.
Okay.
So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I kind of knew I didn't really want to do another startup and not in finance. But I met the team. The CPTO at the time was a guy called Carlos Gonzalez.
Okay.
I loved the mission. I love what we were trying to do. Our tagline at the time was to take the pain out of getting paid. It was founder-led. Carlos had worked at some really interesting places, so I thought I could learn a lot from working with him. The team were great. I've worked places where people have really strong operating principles and values, but GoCardless really did have ones that aligned to what I wanted to do. And they lived them every day. They were talked about. You were interviewed about them, not because if you didn't agree, you were wrong. It was just, are you going to have organ rejection if you join us? Are you aligned with how we see the world and what we're trying to do? And so at that point, I took the jump and joined in September 2018. So just over 5 years ago. Carlos became the chief operations officer and I became the CTO. And together with the CPO, we ran all of product development at GoCardless.
As part of this product development, I want to speak about the innovation at GoCardless because in my company, Coleno, we integrated with GoCardless and it does really, really well what it does, which is recurring payments. The API is amazing. Even the team here was very happy after seeing some nightmare APIs in other systems. But when you go on the console, you don't see much. It's just the payments, the payout, create a customer, and that's it. And obviously, in the background, you must be connected to a lot of institutions. So how really do you see the innovation at GoCardless when GoCardless really focuses on one thing to do really well and nothing else? At least that's what it seems from the outside.
We do one thing really well. We're there to take payments of people, recurring payments via multiple payment rails all around the world. So in a way, yeah, one thing we do looks really simple, but underneath there's huge complexity. We are connected into all of the banks. We also bought a company last year in Latvia that does open banking. So we have direct connections into thousands of banks around Europe. So there's massive complexity there to make that look simple to you. And as well, a lot of those systems are fairly legacy. Banks sometimes haven't invested in some of those things. So we have to do a lot of heavy lifting to make it look simple to you, even though it's complicated for us. And then the final bit is a scale thing, which is when we first started, we were a UK only business. And since then we've grown internationally. And we've both grown in complexity because of international scheme rules, but also because of volume. We're now processing so many payments that at peak volume, we have to make sure we can process all the payments in the window the bank gives us. And we've got to do it absolutely flawlessly. And we've got to balance the money to a penny. And we've got to put all the money in the right places, which mostly is not in our bank account, is in someone else's bank account.
So Neil, is it fair to say that the biggest challenges at GoCardless are more technical than product related?
Well, it's interesting because what we realized was we were sitting on a lot of data. So we've been processing payments for more than 11 years, and we see such a large amount of UK bank accounts that we could start to do some interesting things around fraud and account ownership, which are two of the big problems in the industry. So people were doing things like they would sign up for gym membership on direct debit with someone else's bank details or fraudulent bank details. They'd use the gym for a couple of weeks. By the time the gym realized you were fraudulent, you'd go and work out somewhere else. So that you were getting free access to a service because direct debit is quite a slow process to set up and then take first payment. But we realized we'd seen these people before. We knew who'd been fraudulent. We knew who you were in terms of your bank account details. We knew if you were a good payer or not. So we could then start to build a system that prevents fraud with some really interesting fraud models for both the consumer and for the merchant, because it's not just consumers that sometimes commit fraud, also it's merchants themselves, fake businesses trying to take money when they've bought a set of accounts off of the dark web, and then they're trying to just hope that you don't notice the new direct debit. So those two things we're able to build into products that we have around protecting the merchant and protecting the customer. And then also when things do go wrong, maybe you've not got enough money in your bank account when the direct debit comes out, we could automatically work out when the next time to take the payment would be so that we had more success. We call that a product called Success Plus. And that's really powerful for merchants that have got long-term relationships with customers and don't want to have to chase late payments and failed payments. We can do that for them automatically using machine learning. So we built some more products on top of that.
Very interesting.
But yeah, you're right. The core complexity for me certainly comes inside of operating at scale, security, privacy, resilience. Those are the things that sort of keep me away.
No, that's interesting because like it was my next question about security and compliance, but you've answered it. And can I ask, so for all these ETL jobs, extract, transform, load of your data engineering, data science teams, what kind of technologies and products do you use?
So we use a bunch of, we're built on Google Cloud. So we have things like Airflow. We now use Google's model storage. But also, we're at the forefront. One of our principal engineers has done an awful lot of work on data contracts. And what we found was we'd got all this data, and he's written a book on it. We got all this data, but we weren't happy that we knew its provenance, we knew its quality, we knew its schemas, we knew its version, etc. So it's not that much use if you can't actually have some idea about your data. And so we've moved forward on a model now where if you produce data in our system, you own the contracts for that, the schema for that, and ensuring it's put in the right place so it's accessible for other people. And if you fail to do that, like essentially you break your contract and we'd know about it straight away. So then we've got a certain level of veracity on the data that we're consuming, and we can use it with confidence in our product, in our new features that we're building, that the data is what you'd call high quality and is useful for building new products that we can sell to customers.
And this, this data thing that you moved to, because I mean, obviously that's a place I'm in, right, at Peak Data, and we have this whole thing where we have data that goes through these sort of curated buckets, right, bronze, silver, and gold, with the idea being that you always have the raw data in its original form, so that if you need to recreate something that you can, so that you don't just have only transformed data. Is that something that you've also put in this process?
So we tend to use BigQuery for our data store for long-term storage because cost of storing the amount of data that we've got, the history. But yes, we still make sure we've got the original data that we can do for replays, and that's let's be honest, everyone has incidents in their data. That saved us sometimes, when you can know that you can replay when you fixed it, and then have some confidence. And interestingly, we have to actually we have to store every single transaction that we've ever done when it's regards to moving money. So we have imagine double entry bookkeeping. We've got double entry bookkeeping going all the way back. That's billions of transactions that we've got stored that say moving money from a customer to us, from us to a merchant. We're doing a refund. We're doing money movement the other way when you've overpaid your gas bill or whatever like this. There's all sorts of that goes on, and we have to make sure we've got a line by line ledger for where the money was and at what time, because the rules around safeguarding of customers and merchants' money are really strict, and we need to make sure we're absolutely aligned to all of those.
I mean, we are doing something similar, probably on a different scale to you, but we're just collecting data on doctors around the world and storing all of that. So we need to be able to recreate that. So yeah, it's the whole thing around data engineering is a very interesting world to be in. And we had a guy on here a few episodes back, and that was his whole focus, and he'd written quite a few books on it, and just making a point that really having a team that's very, very focused on, collecting it, processing it, storing it in the best way possible is the only way you can really get value out of it downstream from AI or from whatever else you want to do with it, right?
Yeah, and that was a problem for us until we started moving towards more schema-based data consumption, and with sort of data contracts associated with it. Then you've got a level of confidence that things fail early if they're going to fail, and otherwise you've got a degree of confidence in the data that you're consuming further on. But yeah, building the at Capital One, there was a lot of building data lakes, and data lakes are really useful until you try and do something with them when you're trying to join data from across a massive organization, and then you start to struggle. So we've been through our own version of that, but have got to a much better place.
I see. And I have a question now. It's not the easiest. It's about your leadership philosophy. It's not the easiest for an engineering mind to speak about qualitative rather than quantitative questions like this. But how has your leadership style evolved over your career? What key lessons have you learned about leading engineering teams in fast-paced environments?
Oh, that's interesting. I think what it comes down to really is a very clear understanding of what I own the decisions on. People say, hire great people, get out of their way. No, that's not what I'm there for. I'm hiring great people, and I'm directing them on certain things, and I'm giving them autonomy on others, and holding them accountable and responsible for the outcomes. And the real thing that matters, there's a tendency to think you're done when your tests pass, when your build is green, when you've deployed the software. That's not done. That's an output. What you really need to care about is the outcomes and the impact that the software that you're building has on your customers, on the business, etc. And so in companies that are product focused like we are, it's really important that everyone gets that it's not done until our customers are using it, they give us feedback when they're delighted with it. So everyone should be thinking about a customer first approach. Even if you're an engineer, you've just joined, you're fixing bugs, you're making a customer's life better, and you need to sort of care about that sort of thing and focus on it just as much as playing with the new latest version of a technology or picking up a new database. They're all useful skills, but the thing that matters, the thing that will make the company valuable is the outputs that we produce and the impact that has.
So do you have everybody in your engineering team that at some point participates in the solutions engineering group?
No, we don't. So we have, but everyone in our engineering team works on first responder. So in terms of tickets that come in, every engineer is working on tickets that come in. Not on-call support. On-call support is a more, we tend to rely on our more experienced engineers for on-call support. But in terms of FR tickets, that's kind of where you start. So first responder.
And how big is your engineering team there today?
We're over 200 in engineering. We were slightly higher at one point. We've got slightly smaller, but we're split across a number of different groups. We made a decision earlier in the year to essentially focus on parts of the business that we thought was important, and many of those have product development engineering inside them. So we have some of the engineers forward deployed into those groups, and some of them are in the core product development groups that look after core platform, everything to do with moving money. So all of the bank payment network. We've got groups to do with all of the connectivity. So all those underlying thousands of connections, how do you maintain them at low cost and with low error rates? That's quite an interesting scale problem that we have there.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, it was interesting, and because I read a blog, I think a Medium blog that you wrote in 2021, and you said at that date you had 80 engineers. And considering at that point, I guess the business was 10 years old, I was quite surprised that you were running what seemed like quite a lean engineering operation. I mean, the largest team I've managed was about 150. And I think that company in California was probably not the same size as GoCardless was back in 2021. Now, albeit we had a hardware component to that, but still, I mean, it seemed like you had a very lean team. And it sounds like you still have quite a lean team now for the size of the business.
Yeah, we've taken on more. It's an interesting one. We spend a lot of time measuring how much time we're spending doing different things, which sometimes is an onerous task for an engineer, but it gives us real insight as to it's not me policing. Yeah. It's not me policing whether they are like I'm not interested in marking their homework. What I'm interested in is saying, look, you spend a lot of time on first responder. You should maybe look at automating some of these things that come in to make it so that you can concentrate on the interesting work, not maybe the more mundane, repetitive work. And so it's empowering for them to go, where are we spending our time? Are we new product development? Are we maintenance? Are we support? And knowing that, we can have an informed conversation with everyone in the business about why we're focusing on one part or new product development or maintenance or enhancements. So it makes it an easier conversation, still driven by data at that point. But yes, every one of my engineering managers would like more people, I'm sure. We've got lots of things we want to do.
More people.
Everybody always wants more people. No, exactly. But I think you're right. I've always tried to run teams lean. And I always think that's kind of the best way. I mean, you're trying to do some forward projection for capacity, but I always think it's the worst problem. We have far too many people and you're trying to figure out what to do with them.
And Neil, about the future of payment technologies, I don't know if you have any opinion, or where do you see the future of payment technologies going, and how is GoCardless preparing for these changes? Obviously, in Europe, open banking is quite big, and you guys are doing a lot there. But I don't know if you have any opinion on the future of payment technology.
It's interesting. It's something we talk about quite a lot, which is, and you're kind of crystal ball gazing a little bit. You're going like, what's Apple going to do? What are the card companies going to do in response to open banking? There's a certain amount of open banking itself will expand into variable recurring payments. We've seen in Australia the legacy direct debit schemes being replaced with Pay2, which is more high speed, instant settlement. You've seen FedNow and RTP and RFP inside the US. So what you're seeing is even countries that have relied heavily on credit card, which is a very popular payment instrument for most people because it's less risky. You often get points. It's easy to use at nearly everywhere that you go. These people are now moving across to some of these other payment rails because they're seeing the advantages in them. And merchants are liking them because of the cost of service of using them. So, but what you're not going to see is, US is a good example. Checks are still really popular in the US. Now in the UK, for instance, very little use of checks these days. So, but these things come in cycles. There's no cliff edge when we see one payment mechanism disappear completely. It's a very gradual decline with a gradual start of the new payment taking over. People get more comfortable. So we think it would be an evolution where we'll continue to see direct debit used well. We'll continue to see car payments used, but we'll start to see these new banking rails that offer instant settlement used more and more. You'll see things in point of sale, e-commerce, etc. And that's where we're looking for the growth as our merchants grow, we grow. That's one of those things, right? We deliver with others, and they're our partners.
And in the same way, like not specific to payment technologies, but really in general technology trends. Like obviously since the beginning of the year, everybody speaks about generative AI, open AI, Google Bard, etc. But do you see any emerging technology trends that you're most excited about, and do you plan to incorporate them into GoCardless strategy, or they're not that relevant for GoCardless business model?
If you think about where we are, like everyone else, we're making sure that we've got a really clear path towards where we want to be as a business. And a lot of that is
Yeah,
around where we spend money. So we're focusing more on things like cost control inside the cloud. It's very easy to spin up new instances of things in the cloud and suddenly get a bill shock at the end of the month. So we're making sure that we're tight controlled on that.
yeah,
We also, we've ended up intentionally with a large Ruby on Rails monolith as our code base. And as we're sort of separating out into different groups, we're deliberately starting to fracture that into different components that can be owned by different parts of the organization so they can move quickly. So we're focused in the technology stack really on getting ourselves ready for moving faster and doing it at a good price point. We're obviously aware of the generative AI, etc., but I see lots of demos, but I don't see many killer use cases yet for where we are now. But we keep an eye on those things.
yeah.
But yeah, for now we're focusing on making sure we're match fit, that we're ready for the next stage of growth, that we can keep up with our demands of our customers and partners. Black Friday is coming up; it's going to be a busy time for us.
You're talking about splitting this this Ruby on Rails thing up a little bit. Again, sort of coming back to this blog you wrote on Medium, albeit 2 years ago, so I'm sure a lot has changed. But you said you had engineers that were taking on department-wide initiatives such as increasing of observability of the products. I can't imagine that stopped in any way, shape, or form. So, assuming that you still have this kind of these people that are doing that, I mean, how is their work managed? Are they like principal engineers, or how do they sort of work across the other teams?
So we've got a much higher number of principal engineers than we had then, and the way we think about that is they're normally T-shaped. I describe them as, so they've got broad experience and then they're expert in one or more areas. The example was someone who's deep into the data contracts world, for instance.
Right.
What we find is that they're sometimes there to lead the hardest problems, but what they're also there to do is make everyone else a little bit better. And if they can make their entire team and group better, the output and the outcomes that we get are really what we're trying to drive forward. So they're helping everyone else. They're working with a team that needs to increase their velocity. They're solving the hardest problems. They're writing the RFCs and getting them approved. They're improving process for us. And they're also some of our best engineers that we can throw at any sorts of problem. When it comes to directing their work, they're largely self-organizing on this. They're senior engineers. They've been around a long time. They dive into the detail. We let them direct a lot of what they're working on. We do also provide, hey, can you go and look at this for us? But these are self-starting engineers, and I want as many of those as possible, whatever level they are, people to go and find problems and solve them.
So at a previous company, what I used to call them were those principal engineers. I used to call them fire jumpers. In the US, they have these guys. They drop in, they parachute into forest fires. I mean, it's a really dangerous job. Yeah. So I always used to say they were like our fire jumpers. We kind of parachute them in to help put out a fire or fix a problem somewhere.
Yeah. We definitely use them for that occasionally. One of them picked up a project on improving our webhook latency and made massive changes within a relatively short period of time with a small team. And the impact and the outcome that has across the whole business and our partners is just massive.
During your career, Neil, have you had any specific project or role that comes to your mind that challenged you the most? And what did you learn from that experience?
Growing a business at a very high speed in Blinkbox in a very cross-constrained way is kind of interesting, because that was learning on the job. I would be, writing code late at night and then hiring the next morning and interviewing. And the challenge with some of this is you are learning on the job. You're you know what, but you also made a lot of mistakes. And so it's you look back and it's more, you need to go through that, because it's like that's where you get your battle scars. It's where you know to focus on diversity and inclusion early on, not just hire people that look and think like you. It's where you realize the importance of having a really good technical architecture. It's where you also understand a lot more about how businesses actually work, where you learn about EBITDA and recurring revenue and customer lifecycle and, cost of acquiring a customer. As an engineer, you can just ignore all of that and go, what's my next problem? As you become a leader, you need to care about the business as a whole, because sometimes the right thing to do is not produce a next feature. It's to go and do something for, the go-to-market team or for a customer. And so having that wider view is challenging when you don't come from that background.
No, for sure. Like I feel that every day at Gareth. Look, Neil, we have a small tradition in the podcast that the guest will present a book that they really like, and the one you send us in advance of this recording is Team Topologies: Organizing Business and Technology Teams for Fast Flow, from Matthew Skelton and Manuel Paes. So can you tell us more about this book and why you chose that one?
Mm-hmm. This is like a reference book for me, because I've been through at GoCardless, I've been through 4 org redesigns, and we've gone from 2 teams to 20 teams, and now we've got groups of teams, and every time you need something different. And the way this book talks about the impact of your architecture on your team structure, the way it talks about things like enabling teams and foundational teams that you need to build, it's really a great reference guide. It's also quite useful when talking about what you're going to do with a monolith. There's a whole section on different types of monolith you have. Are they monolith as a database? Are they monolith as code? Are they monolith in the way you're organized? And we've been through all of those, right? So we've evolved over time, from a single database to multiple databases, from a single, Ruby on Rails to splitting those things out to services that do different work. So it's kind of my, it's a reference guide when you get the opportunity to do your new org design. It's like, right, what do I want in my what's in my shopping basket this time? What do I need for this next set of problems, for this next size? Am I getting bigger? Am I getting smaller? Have I acquired a new, brilliant thing, we acquired a company last year. Like, that means a whole new set of engineers, right? How do we organize ourselves around them? And so being able to sort of work out what your org design should be, it's a great reference book for your planning as a leader.
Yeah, I think, and the whole tech world of startups who scale up, Series C and all the rest of it going on beyond that. I mean, sometimes there's people have this challenge, don't they, who've not been through that world and seen these, I think you said 4 organizational changes, and I would imagine probably quite a number of, some architecture changes within your back-end systems. These are kind of par for the course, aren't they, in sort of scale-up world? Is these massive changes both in the company itself and within the tech that you're building? It's just not unusual to go through those in sort of 12, 18-month periods, right?
Yeah, especially in we all went through that period of hypergrowth when investor money was pointed at us, and we were growing the team and building new things. So yeah, it's been we did a lot of hiring, and that means a lot of reorganizing as we do that.
Yeah. And then I watched another interview of yours. I watched quite a good podcast. You did a panel with a few people, and there was something interesting there that sort of I picked up on. So you said, if Google can do it for you, then let Google do it for me. If Google can't do it, I'll look at open source. And in the end, the buy versus build. Does it make us more money? Is it secret source? Is it IP? So this whole calculation around when you decide to build something. But the wrinkle I was thinking about was the world that you're in. Obviously, you have to deal with fraud, and I'm sure you present what's perceived as a nice juicy target for the bad guys, right? So I had an interesting experience myself. So about 10 years ago, when BA got hacked, I was actually buying a ticket to fly to Portugal. I was one of the people whose credit card information was sucked out by a third-party library. It was on their website, right? Do you remember that one? That was
JavaScript,
kind of a big deal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember
so I
that.
was, thinking to that, do you ever make calculations where you go, you know what, we know that, and the risk of third-party libraries is a considerably rising attack vector now, isn't it? And do you ever sort of look at that and go, for this particular feature, we're going to go and write it from scratch ourselves because we just perceive that there's, too much of a risk where we're bringing in these third-party libraries. Do you make those calculations there now?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Rather than write it ourselves versus third-party libraries, it's more of a the old adage, don't write your own encryption routines, right? So when it comes to specialists around security and privacy, we definitely rely on third parties to help us, and we engage with them for fraud detection, for all of those kind of things. When it comes to open source versus building it ourselves, we still tend to rely on the do we have the time and resource to maintain and support this, or are we better off actually going to a third party, open source or a third party provider for this? We've seen a gradual movement as Google has improved its offering generally, where some of the things that we had open source or built ourselves, we now migrating into a Google offering because they've now stepped up and they now offer one to us. So as I expect, more of the day-to-day will go into Google as our cloud provider as they mature and increase their service offerings, and we'll then be concentrating on the sort of unique value that we can build on top of that.
Okay. Yeah. And then I guess my last question, just because I saw another comment of yours, you were saying that you have a formal policy on rotation between your teams. I'm a really big fan of that because I think it aids retention, where you get engineers that are interested in going and working in another team, and they can if they have that option. How do you balance that, though, with sometimes needing a particular skill into a team versus someone internally who you're really keen on, you think is a great engineer, but they apply for that role? Where does that balance come between, I need someone really skilled with this tech now, but I've got this guy's worked for me for 5 years, he wants to move over there. How do you make that sort of calculation?
So there's a few elements to that to kind of unpack, actually. There's firstly, we don't tend to hire for skills. We hire for ability. And so we don't care if you come from a C++ background or a Python background or a Go background. The second one is my default position is I bet on the person internally, because there's two sorts of context that you need to do a job well. There's the technical context, and then there's the organizational context. And if I hire somebody new, they'll have one, maybe the technical context. They won't have the organizational one. And if I move someone internally, they've got the organizational one, but they're missing the technical one. Now, it's a bit more nuanced because we've had people move from IT functions into engineering. We've had people move from IT into security. Now, both those moves are not, hey, I'd like this job, can I just move across? They're programs where they spend months and months upskilling, and then they start doing shadowing, and then they move across. So for some things, we have a slower rotation policy where it allows you to try before you buy on both sides, upskill, put the effort in, and then you move across. On some, we think of engineers as being mostly fungible, and the skills deficit is something that they're responsible for bridging and do so successfully.
No, I really like that. Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, Neil, thank you so much for coming today for this podcast.
No problem.
I hope you enjoy it. We enjoy thoroughly hearing more about GoCardless. It's a very famous brand now at least in the UK tech ecosystem. So thank you for that, and for everybody listening. Gareth and I will be back in January. Bye bye.
Thanks so much.